The other thing that's really rocks the boat a little bit when it gets almost starts bordering into those philosophical talks where the language becomes almost convoluted. By being receptive in an honest way that comes from a place of gratitude is actually a way of giving. Because the giver, we undermine givers quite often by being unwilling to receive. So when someone says to you, you look really nice today, and you're like, oh, I'm such a mess. It's, I need a haircut so badly. You've just negated their compliment. You just stole their joy.
Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. This is the Conscious Edge podcast, and I'm Alecia St. Germain, entrepreneur and coach. Along with my friend and wellness advocate, Jonathan Duggar, we're diving into what it means to embody radical self-acceptance while still evolving to lead with compassion and kindness. We're sharing our own experiences and expertise as we unpack imposter syndrome, perfectionism, procrastination, and all the other things that lead to burnout and keep you from experiencing pure joy, business growth, and maximum impact. This is a safe and supportive space to explore what it means to be a human creating wealth and building a business. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm Alecia St. Germain here with Jonathan Duggar. And
hey, everybody.
It is upon us. Merry Christmas.
Ho, ho, ho.
So as we're joining you today, it would be Christmas Eve for you. It is not for us because we are not working on Christmas Eve. But we are in that spirit. We're in that place. And hopefully you've popped some earbuds in and maybe we're joining you along with some of their preparations and things that you're getting ready for. Some people, it might be a work day, finishing up some work. Although I think a lot of entrepreneurs have the luxury of deciding not to work these next couple days. Whereas corporate people, I know that's like, oh, I got to do a half day or I had to take a vacation day to have this day off. So if you're just joining us for the very first time, we are so extra delighted that you're here, that you would take some holiday time to listen and be with us. This is our love letter to all of the entrepreneurs, business owners, or not, people who are maybe joining us because they're looking to build a more holistic type of wealth for themselves. And maybe you still work for a corporation, and we love all of you. We love everyone who would be part of this and be part of this message. And this is really about not making money the sole focus of what makes us wealthy, but all of the other experiences that we have, both the ones that are uncomfortable and the ones that are comfortable.
Yes.
And that's so interesting because I don't mean positive or negative. A lot of people refer to emotions and experiences as positive or negative. And I think it's probably more comfortable and uncomfortable, because I think about it like for some people, experiencing joy is super uncomfortable and feels dangerous. And for other people, being angry is the norm and that's their comfort zone. So it isn't positive or negative.
Used to and not used to. What you're comfortable with. Yep.
So we're here to help you live a more holistic, well-rounded life as you go about building your business and creating wealth. And for those of you who are loyal listeners, I want to say thank you so much, especially this time of year. My heart is so filled with love and appreciation because if not for you, what would we be doing here? I mean, I guess we would still be having these conversations because this podcast started.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was about to say that. We would still be having these conversations. Nobody else would be listening to them, though.
Yeah. Yeah. So this podcast really did. We were having these kinds of conversations behind closed doors for 20 years. And then we decided to make a podcast about it. So today, what we wanted to get into and we thought would be really supportive is really talking a lot about receiving. We've done this kind of episode before. We've talked about receiving before, but you're in the thralls of it right now. And so how perfect that we should talk about it today and bring that to the forefront for you. So I think where it makes sense for us to start is really about some of the research that you brought, because I think it's fascinating around receiving versus giving and kind of set the stage from there. And then we want to get into some examples of what people might actually be going through. Like I'm thinking of when someone asks you, can I stop and get anything on their way to your house? I'm thinking of you're in the kitchen doing dishes and people go, can I do anything to help? You know, what that looks like. So
first thought is if this is your first podcast to listen to, or even if you've listened to some of our others, I'd suggest you track back and listen to the episode related to scarcity and abundance, and also the episode related to being grateful and gratitude, gratefulness and gratitude, because it's directly related to this subject in a lot of ways. And it also is very relevant around the holiday times too, I think. So we as a society often have the behavior of giving, even to excess sometimes and to our own detriment sometimes. And often it comes from not a healthy place. We give to avoid often being on the other side of that and the receiving. And I'm not just talking about gifts, although we are here at Christmas time, so gifts are on the forefront, but we give and receive in so many different ways. So there's a lot of great research around being on the receiving end of a compliment, of help and assistance, of gifts, things of monetary value, of money, and how uncomfortable as a society we are with being in those roles. And the research shows that the perception of being on the receiving side is one of weakness and one of loss of control and of vulnerability. And there's some truth to that from the standpoint of we do have to be open in the nature of the word itself. Reception means openness. Being receiving something is to open. And so vulnerability can be a part of that. But one of the cool things that came out of one of the largest research and one of the longest research projects that was done on being open to help, and that was help or assistance, which was sort of the focus of this particular research. It started out with people going through some training, because this is actually becomes a skill set that we can learn and practice and become better at, where people went through some training to learn to be more open to the idea of help and then to the actual receiving of some kind of help. And that took place in various different ways. Well, they actually measured neurochemistry of these folks when they started this process to where they ended up. And at the beginning of the process, even the mention of using the word like help or helpfulness or being willing to ask for help or watching a video of somebody asking for help, the types of biochemistry that presented were stress hormones. Like it caused stress and anxiety for this person to watch a video of someone asking for help. And so these researchers drilled down more and they came up with this program of helping people practice the skill of being willing to ask for and receive help. And once these folks, the majority of these people, I think it was something like 95% or 92% of these people, once they went through this training and got to the place of being willing and open to asking for help, on the receiving of that help, they measured the chemistry, the biochemistry, and it was joyful chemistry. It was very positive chemistry that showed up, even more so than the chemistry that we see when people give gifts, because we know that creates a level of satisfaction and happiness and stress reduction in gift giving in some cases, or in giving of assistance. So the spike in these positive biochemicals was unexpected, and it was just kind of proof, in my opinion, that we're a healthy place to be is one of the, we are comfortable with receiving, comfortable and open and accepting of assistance, of compliments, of gifts.
Yeah, that's, so you're talking about oxytocin, which is one of the pieces of it, at least. And that's the same
dopamine.
The same thing though, so dopamine's released in a lot of those, short acting. It's very short acting, whereas oxytocin is a longer acting,
correct,
sort of love, like related to love and what happens when you're bonded with your child, and certain, when you look into your pet's eyes, like things like that make a longer acting joy, essentially.
Yes. Yep.
And so I thought that was two things that are fascinating. One, giving and not receiving is a false sense of control.
Yes.
And then receiving and being open to receiving actually increases your joy and happiness more than giving.
Correct.
Which is very counter to what anything we believe, like consciously in society.
Yeah. And the other thing that's really rocks the boat a little bit when it gets almost starts bordering into those philosophical talks where the language becomes almost convoluted. By being receptive in an honest way that comes from a place of gratitude is actually a way of giving. Because the giver, we undermine givers quite often by being unwilling to receive. So when someone says to you, "You look really nice today," and you're like, "Oh, I'm such a mess. It's, I need a haircut so badly." You've just negated their compliment. You just stole their joy.
Mm-hmm.
Or little things that we need to reinforce in this society so badly, like somebody offers to let you go ahead of them in the grocery store line. And you think, because society has told us, or religion has told us, or some other messaging has told us, that we should say, no, you go ahead. You go ahead. It's fine. I'm not in a hurry today, whatever it is. You maybe think you're being gracious in that aspect, but when you don't reinforce and you don't receive that assistance, if they're offering it in a genuine way, they may never do that again. You may have just kiboshed a behavior that's much needed to be reinforced in our society of being willing to,
take care of your neighbor,
help somebody else out, a total stranger, a moment of kindness, a random act of kindness.
So let's think about, you're in the kitchen. It's the holidays. Let's get really relevant to what's going to happen today and tomorrow. You're in the kitchen, you got some cleanup to do, or you're prepping, or you're doing something, and someone says, "Can I help you with something?" And you say no. It is so incredibly uncomfortable to sit and watch someone else work. And we know how much work you've done to prepare for this party and to put everything together, and everyone's coming over. And then you're standing there and you're doing nothing. And it's so uncomfortable. So for you to actually receive that help is a gift.
Yes.
For that other person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the most, that just made me think of something. We had some friends in South Florida that threw a holiday party every year. And one of the people is a chef, is a trained chef. And the first 10 people that would show up at their party, he would assign a task. Like the first 10 people through the door, he had a list. And he's like, could you go hang these lights in the backyard? It's not always in the kitchen, something, but he had a task. And my partner and I made it a point to show up, try and get there as the first 10 people because we wanted to help. And it was so well thought. He had thought out something that, and he would sometimes say like, Duggar, I know you don't mind climbing a tree. So go back there and climb that tree and hang these lights in it. You know, like he had the person in mind. And sometimes it would even be like, oh, I'm glad you got here quickly because this is what I need done. In my opinion, that is the perfect party host. You know, it's like they're sharing the responsibility and they're helping. It's a gift that and being willing that they're giving to that because you can feel helpful instead of being sidelined. And it's like, no, you just enjoy. You sit over there in the corner and enjoy me breaking my neck trying to get everything ready. So.
Right. You've just given me a perfect idea for the retreat because we want to cook for one of the nights for our guests at the retreat. And I was like, oh, okay. We're going to have we'll have some assigned tasks and we're going to throw an amazing party, but we're going to do it together because there's something so bonding.
Collaboration.
It's like such a bond. And then I think about the family dynamics that happen on days like today, where sometimes it's when people are idle, they cause trouble. And I'm thinking like, oh, hang on. What if here's an idea for you. You're probably, somebody who's listening to this in hindsight is, gosh, I wish I would have known that on that day. But like, what if you have someone who is really got a gift or talent in something or would be great at something and you actually assign them something that will, I don't want to say keep them busy because that sounds like it sounds manipulative, but it like
that they excel at and they actually like doing. Yes.
Yeah. Like gives them purpose. And then you, instead of you being annoyed with their, the family member's behavior, you can have appreciation for their support and help. So that idea. New thoughts on party throwing. Thank you.
Well, and that made me think as well, kind of what I had just mentioned about learning to be receiving on the receiving side or asking for help. All those things that's a skill that you can learn. And I think you could personally speak to this as can I. When you're in the kitchen and you kind of have your plan in front of you, especially if there's a time crunch, often it is much easier to do something yourself. At least we think of it that way because I know exactly where everything is in the kitchen. I don't have to answer any questions as opposed to saying or relinquishing some of that control and saying, could you help me with X? Could you do this for me? But it's a great opportunity to practice
asking for help,
stepping into that role. Yeah, exactly. And stepping out of that place of control and being a little bit vulnerable and also potentially, like you said, giving someone a purpose, feeding a need that's helpful and useful for them. So no, I think it's awesome opportunity.
I would challenge you listening to actually plan ahead a little bit. And what if today, instead of being reactive to just asking for help, but actually planning for help and saying, well, if somebody asks me, do you need any help or can I help you with this? Like, what if you, instead of it being easier for you to do it yourself because you know where everything is in the kitchen, what if you actually planned for that help? And so you could immediately know exactly, have things ready for someone to assist you.
That's awesome. And I had a bullet point for myself, just like a reminder to bring up and it ties back to one of our previous episodes. One of the things that I think we really need to do is we need to reframe the whole concept of what's selfish and what's selfless, because we often think of asking for help as selfish.
Or weak. Yeah.
Yeah. Or weak. And, when we were punished for being selfish as kids or in this society. And it's like, we just need to redefine selfishness is the biggest thing. And so it's like asking for help often is an opportunity for everybody involved to grow, to collaborate, to learn about each other, to learn about a skill. I mean, one of the things like we talked about in the last episode, my mom loves to do Thanksgiving and she makes this amazing dressing. Well, this dressing has raw celery in it. And one of the things that she's had me do for years, even though I know she's quite capable of it herself and probably does it much better than me, but one of the things that she's always asked me to do is I chop the celery. If I get there in time, I chop the celery. And sometimes I do it the day ahead and she needs like 4 cups of celery. So, it's a lot of celery. And I'm not the most exceptional celery chopper, but that's something that I think it does help her on some level. But it's something we collaborate on. We collaborate in her kitchen and I find joy in it. She finds joy in it. So again, it's a way to create an opportunity for everybody involved to collaborate.
Yeah. Well, and I was just thinking back to the idea, the sense of control, right? And that makes people feel safe. Control oftentimes makes people feel safe. And so when you flip it to planning for help, you actually maintain that security of control.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a way to trick the system. Like, we know we're not going to change you in one episode. You're not going to be like, oh, I no longer feel the need to control. Especially not our entrepreneurs out there, because our type A personality go-getters, like, oftentimes have that need for control. But so often it's such a false sense of control. Your brain has a very misguided perception of what actual control is. And it's
it's usually avoidance behavior. We're avoiding something by doing that. So,
and I think control comes from control of self, not control of others. That's actual control.
Yeah. Very true. Very wise words.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk also about was like on the receiving side, or not the receiving side, on the giving side. And if you are headed to someone else's house, or you are going to be with other people and you're going to be one of those people that wants to give help and be part of that. And you have a host that is, as we have described, who hasn't listened to this podcast yet, send it to them before you get there. It'll make your day so much easier, right? But also, sometimes there's this mental load that it takes in assigning help. So as I was talking about, be prepared for help. Well, if you haven't prepared for help, you have to come up with this list or this idea or these things, or what can someone do? And when you're in a doing mode, sometimes you don't have the mental energy to figure out how to assign help. So what I have found to be very helpful, and something that I've started practicing in a lot of different areas of my life, is when I want to offer help, I'm very specific about what I can do to help. So I might be at a party and I might say, hey, I'm going to take the trash out. Like, I noticed it's full. Do you want me to take this trash out? Or where are your trash bags? I'm going to take this trash out. So it's noticing and being aware of something that you could do that would be helpful, and then asking if you can do that for them. Now, how they receive that, again, send them this episode. That's my shameless plug for Share the Podcast.
Well, super good point. But I do think that that's one of those things where you do have to be mindful of the context and the language that you're using, and realize that people are sometimes sensitive to especially, let's say it's a party situation or throwing the dinner situation. They're sensitive to this sort of perception that they have everything under control and that everything is going smoothly. And so even just thinking about how you approach something like that. So approach it with a compliment. It's like, oh my gosh, you are doing so many amazing things. That pie smells amazing. Like, is it okay if I take the trash out right now? Lead with something that sets the stage, that you respect how much they've got going on, as opposed to
jumping in and taking control of it.
Yes. Well, we let our control freakness get out of control in somebody else's environment.
And what some people would hear is, I'm not doing good enough.
Exactly.
And so then it's going to degrade that connection. So I love that approach, that very specific languaging. You're so good with languaging things and how to give that help as well. So what about on the gift giving side of things? Like,
oh man, there's so much. I mean, we addressed some of this in a previous episode, but we are so hardwired related to how we give and putting ourselves often in financial strain with the gifts we give and emotional strain with trying to find the perfect gift and things like that. And if we actually put more of that energy and effort, this is my opinion. I don't have the research to back this up, although there's probably some out there. I haven't researched the research on this particularly thing, but my sense is if we put a little more effort and time into really being honest with ourselves and maybe even the conversation with another person in terms of what's really important, the gifts would take on a whole different dynamic and the reception of the gifts would take on a whole different dynamic. And acknowledging when there's a disconnect, it's like when something is overboard or excessive or that kind of thing.
Well, that was kind of what I wanted to mention was that there's been times where people have been extraordinarily generous and the belief that you have to reciprocate at the same level, even if it's not it's not possible for you financially. And so I think that there's a really strange dynamic that can happen in gift giving where someone's extremely generous. The other person can't keep up. I'm like, we've lost at that point when you're having that kind of conversation in your head or out loud about the mismatch of level of gift where we've lost the magic of gift giving. And
exactly.
I've been on the receiving end of very generous gifts and I've been a very generous gift giver. And I never am giving a gift because I expect you to give me something back equally awesome. I'm giving it to you because I want you to have it. However, being on the receiving end of it, I also have felt really uncomfortable with the level of gifting that I have received, knowing I will never be able to pay that back in that way.
Yep. Well, it's sad that the reality quite often around gift giving and receiving tracks back to something that's traumatic for a person. So they've been in situations where help, and I'm using air quotes, or a gift was done in a way that was manipulative or controlling. And that person, it's happened to them enough that when they're on the receiving side of anything, they're now paranoid that, okay, what do they want? Or the other side of that also has some toxicity tied to it is like you were mentioning where you're there and you're like, okay, how do I one up this or not even one up it? How do I balance this now? Because I owe them something. That was so helpful. That was so big. That was so magnanimous that I don't know how to keep up with. So I've got to come up with something to one up that or to at least balance the scales. Whereas the shift, and again, it takes practice and work, but the shift is to acknowledge and be grateful and have gratitude for something that is so amazing and such a good fit and be thankful in that way. Let your thankfulness be excessive.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh my goodness, how in the world did you remember a conversation from 6 months ago that I was starting to journal? And this leather embossed journal that you got me with my favorite quote on the front of it. I am so touched and amazed and blown away that you have that depth of thoughtfulness, that kind of be excessively thankful and be honest in that thankfulness
without letting it be a judgment of yourself.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
Exactly.
That's what I'm trying to get to is like the gift giving. When you are not receiving it and having gratitude for it, you are using this very beautiful, lovely thing. And by thing, I mean either physical or act of kindness or whatever as a comparison or judgment of your own worthiness.
Exactly.
And that's messed up.
Yeah, it is. And it takes some unraveling. It takes practice. And you have to do it in baby steps because I still find myself very uncomfortable. And one of these things revolves around paying for meals. When you're with a group and somebody wants to pick up the check, and it's not that I think I have to always pick up the check, but I have no issue with it ever when I'm financially able. If it was a different situation, I was struggling and whatever, but when I'm financially able, it's something that I get some joy out of. There's some oxytocin that's released when, lasting joy that when I pay for some check. But then just recently it happened to me. Somebody said, you seem to always find a sneaky way to get the check. I'm getting the check today. Like it was the first thing they said to me when I saw them at this restaurant. And it took me a second. I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, okay, but the words that wanted to tumble out of my mouth, even after all these years of practicing this, the words that wanted to come out of my mouth was, no, you don't have to do that. And of course they don't have to do that. They want to do that. And me negating that is undermining their joy, is undermining their thoughtfulness, their gratefulness, their attitude of giving. And that's incredibly wrong. That would be so wrong of me. But I've done it. I've done that multiple times. It's like, no, I've got it.
He does pick up the check.
I knew you would get that one.
I've even actually thought about it and I was like, I need to ask him, what is that? We can do that on another podcast episode, but it's really fascinating to me. Just part of this is a money conversation. And so obviously that's a whole nother podcast. That's going to be a whole day we spend at the retreat on that. But what I'm realizing is those moments where I'm judging myself and someone has been given me something really generous. And I'm like, I know right away. I just recently figured out that I have a big assumption. You've heard us talk about big assumptions before, but I have a big assumption that the amount of money that I have is directly related to the amount of that my opinion matters. Yeah.
Amount of value. You place self-value, self-worth on that.
Right. Yeah. And it's not true. It's not true. But as we're unpacking this with the gift giving, I'm like, oh, that's the big assumption. That's why it makes me feel like I got to even it out because I want to have just as much say too. I want my opinion to matter too.
Yeah. And this is good to mention at this point that, and I think you highlighted this earlier, is dealing with this stuff is so convoluted and so wrapped up in so many different things. And often they come from a toxic place or some bad experiences or traumatic experiences. It's not quick to unravel, and it's not an instant fix. And it is something that takes practice and takes reoccurring practice, because certain situations, certain people, certain environments will bring that back. Even if you've had lots of practice, it will bring it back to a place of taking you out of gratitude, taking you out of authenticity and honesty, and going to a place of paranoia or control or worthiness, lack of worthy, or feeling unworthy, and whatever it is. So it's okay that you have slip ups. It's okay that you go back to that place of doubt, but use your experience, use those experiences, find the gift in it, find the way to practice the skill of open and honest reception.
One of my really good friends, Shannon, we do things for each other. And she always goes, thank you, I will receive that. And she goes, I go, oh, okay. You're going to receive that? And she goes, yes, that is my reminder to just say, thank you, I will receive that. And she goes, eventually my goal is to not have to say, I will receive that. And she goes, because I know how funny that sounds to people. But the other thing I wanted to mention, and we're going to have to wrap it up because people are busy and they got to get to their holiday celebrations. But the other thing I wanted to mention was that the experiences that you have had and the conditions that you have placed around receiving, like, oh, I'm going to owe someone, or, oh, my voice isn't going to matter, my value, whatever, that those experiences that you have had will give you the body reaction, the initial like gut reaction, no matter who it is. And when you were saying it's kind of complicated to unravel all of this, I don't want people to think that also there isn't some people out there who give with expectations, because there are.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
Part of the unraveling of this is understanding first that you have a thought around it. First, that it feels dangerous to receive. But then secondly, to question if it's always unsafe to receive. So there's this very always and never quality. Our brain works in a very always and never kind of quality. And so anytime you have those extremes, then that's a wiring. That's that's not taking into account the situation. And so there are people in your life who, that's how they operate. That's their operating system, is that they give with a certain expectation. You can choose when to think certain thoughts and when not to. Your body's always going to have a reaction because of, not always, but your body will initially always have a reaction to receiving until you unravel that. And then when you're aware of it, like, oh, this is a receiving situation, I'm feeling triggered. Who's in front of me? Oh, this is my best friend. This person I feel safe with. This person is somebody who we have a very open relationship of giving and receiving. So I can receive this and there's no shield that needs to be up. And then you've got other people in your life who this is a problem. And maybe there's some healthy boundaries that need to be put in place with that particular relationship. But the idea here is that you're no longer being driven by an automatic response to it. So I wanted to just say, like, you don't always have to just, receiving is safe all the time. Yeah. Other people in your life sometimes will hold that against you. But if you take some time, are mindful, and actually take each experience as an individual experience, you can discern between when it's safe or not.
Yes. That's the word that was popping into my head, was discernment.
Yeah.
And the great thing too about when you do get to a place and practice the skill enough to have unpacked your own baggage so that the situation isn't being fueled by your own things, even in those, when dealing with a potentially toxic person that maybe has manipulative intent or ill intent involved, you can elect to still be grateful and not reactive.
Right.
And this is a whole episode in and of itself, but when you're dealing with narcissism, one of the most firepower you have against a narcissist is to not respond in the way that they're trying to get you to respond.
Right.
So once you get to that place of understanding your own behavior and your own thought patterns, your own reactions, it becomes a much simpler process to take the path that you choose to take.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know what? I'm going to be grateful for this. Their intention really doesn't matter. This is an amazing gift. And absolutely, I'm thankful.
And that's what I was saying around, you could be thankful, but then maybe it's actually more of a boundary problem as opposed to a receiving problem.
Exactly. So that, I love the word discernment. I think that that's got a lot of power behind it. So,
yeah. So, well, we've got to wrap it up, and we'll be back with you next week on New Year's Eve, which will be my 15-year anniversary, Jonathan.
Ooh, I just can't believe that. That's amazing.
I know. So with all of that being said, sending you extra merry love.
And happy holidays, and be well, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Conscious Edge podcast. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to be kind and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a review to help us bring more compassionate leaders building businesses and creating wealth to the table. And for show notes, head over to consciousedge.com/podcast. This podcast and the linked materials are presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes and should not be taken as personal or medical advice or any kind of mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you feel you need such services. Please be advised that all investing and entrepreneurial endeavors involve risk, and the use of the education and information on this podcast and linked materials is at the user's own risk.